and that's kind of interesting too. This Norwegian seaweed cultivation company was started in Portugal, in Cascais. And then we figured out the waves were very big here, so we went to Norway, but we were 5 marine biologists and marine engineers starting from here. 10 years later now, we got the first concession in Norway. We have 65 hectares there. That's 65 football fields. We're not producing on all of them. And we have a hatchery, a nursery, producing the seeds there. But it was in Portugal it started. And this picture is kind of maybe historical too, because in 2012, we planted the first tree, sort of, in the ocean in Portugal as a company, with great help from CIMAR in Porto, Isabel Sosa Pinto and Isabel Acevedo and Instituto Hidrográfico. Also, they were helping us. And we proved that the plant that was growing in Norway, the same plant, Latin name same, was growing well in Portugal. So here now we are in a good position, although we went to Norway first because there are smaller waves there. Now we want to get started with cultivation here in Portugal as well. Here's just some pictures from the production in Norway. You see from the farm there, when it's taken up and harvested. We process the seaweed frozen to keep all the nutrients, and almost everything for the moment is going for food. And the big food industries, they are waking up now because they want sustainable food, they want salt replacements, they want natural MSG. So a great interest there. On the bottom part here you see pictures from our nursery and breeding center in Trondheim. But it was offshore cultivation we started with, and we have a patent in 23 countries on the vertical way, sheets of cultivating seaweeds. By doing it that way, it's more suitable for offshore exposed conditions. It's also possible with more efficient harvesting. And there have been lots of talk today about other industries, wind and wave and so on, and we think definitely there are many synergies here. Actually, when I came in, I looked at this poster, and I find it very strange that you don't have seaweed on this, when you think it's so big part of the aquaculture and energy in the future. So maybe next time we will see that. When we first started, we had some challenges. There are always people who are critical. And the government, they gave us license actually after 3 months, which is not bad, 65 hectares. But then you had politicians, other politicians, you had environmentalists and so on. They thought, they knew that I was in salmon before, so they thought, oh, Paul, what are you going to do now? No, it's something, because salmon is not all positive. There are some talks about, that they can pollute in some areas and so on. So we told them, well, why don't you come back after 1 year? And what they saw was amazing. They saw the opposite. It's not only sustainable, it is more than sustainable, it's positive. Sustainability, I think, is actually a quite dull and boring name if you compare, we have to do more than sustainable. So here you're adding fish into the water. There's more fish. So fishermen were happy. They saw more birds. And you take up CO2, and you also make more oxygen in the water. And that led us to, or I thought then, because I grew up with seaweed, to harvesting wild seaweed as a kid, and I asked myself, what about the wild seaweed forests in the world? How are they doing? And they're not doing well. They're disappearing all over the world, including here in Portugal, the kelp forest. So then I took the initiative to start a non-for-profit organization called Sea Forester, which is focusing on that. And here we like to look at the world in a kind of different way. You can imagine everyone saying we have a blue planet, but you can't really grasp it from all the angles. So in this picture, imagine you take all the land and you put it around the lake. And this is in the right proportions. Also the continents are there. And now all the focus in the world now is on plastics, it's on MPA, and it's on overfishing. And very little awareness about the forest on the growth, on the potential, on what we call the blue front yard. And every continent has one. So I think we can look at the ocean like almost like a washing machine. And what's the most important part with a washing machine? It's the power. The power in the ocean is no problem. We have the sun, we have the moon that makes the water tumble. So that part of the washing machine is working. But the filter is broken. The filters are disappearing. And that is happening all over the world. In Norway, 8,000 square kilometers are gone. In Portugal, most of the seaweed forest is gone. California, 93%. Australia, same. Nobody knows about it. We don't see underwater. And then we have to think, how can we get more marine vegetation back? And then there are some initiatives, coral reefs and seagrass and so on. And why do we have so much there? Because we can see tourists and people, they see corals, they see beautiful pictures, a lot of focus goes there. Seagrass too, you can see from land, and mangroves. Seaweed has been completely forgotten, despite that it's 82% of all marine vegetation in the world, and it's disappearing. So how we can do it? You add, you restore existing forests, get the vegetation back, but you can also cultivate. Cultivation in itself also brings seaweed back. So you have different tools. It's not only restoration, but you can also cultivate, both nearshore and offshore. And then we asked ourselves, well, most people think, seaweed, a little bit seaweed by the coastline is not going to make a big difference globally with climate change and so on. But imagine if you lower the sea level all around the world, not increase it, lower it 30 meters. That is the average depth that marine vegetation grows. So the area, the land sort of area that emerges then, we wanted to calculate. It was not easy, but that is 15 million square kilometers. So it's bigger than Europe, bigger than America, 3 times the size of Amazon is the zone, the target zone, that is just there that can be first taken care of and much better utilized. And then the benefits of doing that is both environmental and industrial. First, it takes up CO2. It does so 5 times faster than the rainforest. But it's also important that it cleans the ocean. Everything we do on land ends up eventually in the ocean. So all the runoffs from agriculture and everything goes there. So you have too much nutrients. And that the seaweed can take up and produce oxygen. And then you have more fish. We need more fish. It's not enough to stop overfishing. You can never stop overfishing as long as there is greed and hunger in the world. Biodiversity increase. And then coastal protection as well. All this environmental. But you can also harvest sustainably at the same time, both of wild stocks and of cultivation. And then you have food, feed, fertilizer, and energy source. And then lots of other industries as well will benefit from this. In Sea Forester, we're a group of mostly of volunteers. We have some full-time marine biologists too, and we're trying just to get this movement really started. And we have 4 teams. One is the action team that's really doing projects to get things started, research and so on. And then also communication team is very important because awareness is obviously needed. And data team to ensure common methodology is implemented. And importantly, finance. New financial mechanisms must be developed to make this a global campaign. In Portugal, we have already got one project from Fundo Azul, where we will plant out 4 different types of seaweed. Fine? 4 different types of seaweed along the coast of Portugal. And we will test out seeding methods of this so it can be scaled up later. We also have a project in Cascais, and that is already started. And I think it's very interesting because here there was a municipality that decided to take action. They don't just look at Sintra or green forest on land and to take care of that. They realized here we have a blue front yard in front of the municipality that we can boost the value of. There will come more fish, there will be more tourism, and it captures CO2. So they clearly saw that value and wanted to invest and finance this, and then we joined forces, and that looks very promising. And we see also that the local community engage directly too with dive shops and local population, because it's where they live. So now, basically, we want to continue to develop this, and we think that especially to get a good sponsorship and cooperation between Norway and Portugal, which is Portugal is the southern limit of the large seaweeds, and Norway is the northern limit. So we hope that Portugal and Norway can be sort of the front runners for taking this and making it like a global campaign to have projects pop up all over the world. Thank you.
Jerónimo Martens, Offshore Aquaculture Pilot Project.
Go ahead. Thank you very much. It's a big pleasure for me to be here with such a distinguished panel of mostly engineers to be talking about aquaculture. And why is so much interest in aquaculture now? First of all, because it is a growing industry. The population is growing, and so we need to feed world population. And it's not only the population that is growing, it's also the fact that fish consumption is increasing worldwide. So we need more fish to supply a growing population. And this is particular in terms of Portugal. We Portuguese, we like fish very much. We have a big appetite for fish. Mainly wild fish, but also the reality is that the fish consumption of farmed fish is increasing in Portugal. The biggest problem is that most of this fish is imported. So 95% of the fish, the farmed fish that is consumed in Portugal, is imported. So we need to reduce this amount, and we need to produce our own fish. But when we look at the reality of aquaculture in Portugal, we see that it is a very fractionate and small industry, very diverse, many different species that are produced, and the big bulk of production is actually shellfish. So it's bivalves, it's clams, mussels, and oysters. In terms of fish, we produce a limited amount, and most of it is land-based. The availability of land in Portugal for the production of aquaculture is also limited. So we need to look at other strategies. And cage aquaculture is actually the most efficient type of aquaculture. This because of the ratio between cost of installation and productivity. Also, we have the fish in their natural environment. We can have higher productivity. This is actually the most efficient types of aquaculture are produced under this technology, like the salmon in Norway, or even sea bass and sea bream in the Mediterranean. Also, with this type of technology, cage farming, we can also introduce more technology, automatic feeding cameras, and we can see the fish. So this would be the most interesting type of aquaculture in Portugal. However, we have a lot of constraints that need to be overcome. Basically, our natural conditions, because we all know that we have a very hydrodynamic ocean. Also, we have environmental conditions that are not the most appropriate for the different species that can be cultured. Also, we have issues regarding licensing, complexity of licensing, difficulties of reaching out to public entities. We have also this is a capital-intensive industry, so there's demand for high investments, and we have long periods of time of investing before you get the returns. Also regarding competition, producing in Portugal, we have to compete with other countries that also produce the same species, and they can produce more efficiently. Last, conflict of interests. We have many interests regarding the sea. We have mainly from the tourist industry and from the fishing industry. So we'll be fighting for space also with these industries. So looking at the biggest constraint. So as I mentioned, the roughness of the sea is, I would say, one of the biggest challenge. We have very high hydrodynamic coastline that is exposed to extreme waves, especially in the west coast of Portugal. The south coast of Portugal, the conditions are better, but there are currents to be considered. We have Madeira that has a good profile. If you look at the north coast of Madeira, again, they have a very high hydrodynamics, but the south coast of Madeira Island has a good potential. The Azores also have a lot of water mass. The issue of the Azores would be the extreme weather events that they have, like typhoons. So the extreme waves, the challenges, as you mentioned, and talking to an audience of engineers, you will look at the extreme structure limits designs that you have to look at with waves of HS of 12 meters and so on. Also, we have to consider the currents and the movement of the water with these extreme waves. The good point regarding the conditions in Portugal is because we have waves with long periods, this softens the movement and makes it interesting even at offshore conditions. The other very important point, and this is not related to engineering but to biology, is that when we look at the situation of Portugal, we see that we are in a transition area. So in the coastline we have water temperature that is not optimal for either temperate species or cold water species. So we know that, for example, for cold water species, the north of Portugal is the southern limit, for example, for salmon. But for temperate species like sea bass, sea bream, we have temperatures that are lower than compared to the Mediterranean area. And for those that don't know, for fish, for their growth, temperature is the most important parameter. So if they have the optimal growth, they will grow much faster. We have Madeira that has very good conditions in terms of temperature profile and can be a good potential in terms of growth for temperate species. However, in Madeira, you only are allowed to produce or sea bream or yellowtail. Another constraint that we have to overcome is the logistics. So if we are operating offshore, you need good access to harbors. And the reality is that when you look at the harbors in Portugal, few ports are suitable for aquaculture areas, especially because of the hydrodynamics of the coastline. In the south of Portugal, you have better conditions, but then you have the conflicts with the tourism activities. Also, one thing is when you have extreme weather conditions, you cannot leave the port, so you need we call it the ports the barras are closed, so you cannot operate. So you need to develop also boats that can go to sea when you have rough conditions. Okay. So what are the tools that we need in terms of establishing offshore aquaculture in Portugal? I would say, first of all, it is data. We need accurate environmental data regarding currents, water temperature profiles across the year. We need reliable, predictable models that can tell us when we can go out and we cannot go out, when the extreme condition weather is coming, so we can take mitigation measures to avoid and to prepare for such events. Technology, I would say technology is the most relevant point. We need new type of cages that can resist the conditions that we have in Portugal. We need new type of moorings. We need new types of support vehicles or boats that can go out and support this industry. Also very important, if you go offshore, and if we cannot go offshore because of the weather conditions, we need remote control. We need equipment to do ROVs to do unmanned inspections of the cages, of the moorings, because we are going to deeper waters. So we need autonomous vehicles that can do all the assessment, all the monitoring of the fish, of the nets, and of the moorings. And if we are going to be offshore, we need also reliable communication and transmitter networks. As I mentioned, Madeira has excellent conditions for the aquaculture offshore. There are already 2 projects of offshore aquaculture in Madeira Island. There was a strategy from the government of Madeira to reach up to 6,000 tons of production in offshore aquaculture. At the moment, there is some conflict of interest and some, not complaints, but there is some movements against aquaculture, and this is because of the tourism industry. And right now, probably the offshore aquaculture in Madeira will not grow, and it will be stagnant. So we need to find solutions for that. As I mentioned, the technology is going to be the key for the future, and we have now a trend in the aquaculture industry that started in Norway, which is to look at open sea farming and the development of projects looking at technology for open sea operations. So it's a new trend in the industry. There are many types of concepts being developed mainly in Norway to make this a reality. And it's with this reality that we can have a future in offshore aquaculture in Portugal. We need to develop technology that can sustain or can resist the conditions that we have in Portugal, mainly the extreme weather. And that's why we believe that this can be an opportunity with this new technology emerging. And we are now looking at investing in open sea farm. But because of the investments that we need to do, we need to look at the species that has a high value market. And that species for us is salmon. And you say, why salmon? Why producing salmon in Portugal? Well, because, as we mentioned previously before, we have the same type of seaweeds in Norway, and we have the same types of seaweeds in Portugal. Salmon exists in Portugal. We have in the north of Portugal rivers that have salmon. So salmon is an endemic species of Portugal. We know that the water temperature in Portugal, especially in the north, ranges between 12 degrees and 20 degrees. Although if you go deeper in the water, you'll have a profile temperature between 13 and 14 degrees, which is actually the optimum temperature for salmon. So it would be possible to produce in salmon. And going to offshore, you reduce the problems with diseases, with sea lice, and so on. So we started a pilot to test the growth of salmon in Portugal. So this is a private-owned project that is financed by Jerónimo Martins. So basically, we want to assess the growth of salmon and to see if they would grow well under Portuguese farm conditions. So we developed a prototype of a cage and a buoy that contains all the support devices regarding feeding, telecommunications, sensors, and so on, so that we can look at the possibility of producing salmon in Portugal. So this project is ongoing. We hope that to put in January, February of this year the cage and the fish in the water, so that by September, October we already have some results regarding the potential of producing salmon in Portugal. And as everybody believes here in the audience, offshore aquaculture is a future, can be a future in Portugal, but it's going to depend on the technology development, also in terms of regulatory measures, and I think that with all the support regarding renewable energies, I think that it can also be a synergistic movement regarding renewable energy and aquaculture. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ambassador Antonio, thank you for inviting me to come here and speak. I had a speech here, not here, but at the WavEC conference 3 years ago. Then I was coming up with a vision that you could do offshore aquaculture in Portugal. I think, Antonio, we could say that it was shut down on the conference. Nobody believed that it could be done. I'll just show you some nice picture that was taken this morning. This is from the field where Pedro's cage is being installed. Morten, our colleague, is out there now doing survey. He took these pictures 7 o'clock this morning, so we are doing it. What I want to talk about is the next stage. And to talk about the next stage, first I'll just mention who we are. It's me, Carl, it's Paul sitting over there, Morten. And we got, the presentation has gone. Anyway, doesn't matter. So we have been working here in Portugal for almost 10 years now, in and out. I met Antonio in 2009, and since then we have been working with projects. In 2014, I got in touch with Pedro and Carnazao from JMA, and he said, Carl, because we had some presentation on a possible technology to do offshore aquaculture, and he said, okay, Carl, let's try it. So if offshore aquaculture, subsea aquaculture is going to happen in Portugal, it's thanks to Pedro. So Morten, Paul and I, we are coming from the dark side, the oil and gas industry, all of us. My biggest achievement, I think, is managing to break Paul away from his last job in Brazil, being in charge of all the floating production platforms from BV Offshore there. Together we have something like 95 years of experience in offshore oil and gas. I think it's interesting to talk about the future. And for us, we believe that this can be done. If we haven't done that, if you haven't believed that, we wouldn't have been here. So, we think that it can be done, and we think that our vision is that by 2030, it will be possible to produce 100,000 tons of salmon subsea offshore Portugal. In order for that to happen, as Pedro has mentioned, there needs to be some technology development. We have now, or I have done, because Paul and Morten has been 100% in charge of the project together with Pedro. So I've spent my time looking at developing the next phase of the project, which we call phase 2 or early production. So we have been talking with technology providers in Portugal, in Norway. We have spoken with universities, we have spoken with stakeholders. So basically, I believe that, if somebody came to me today and said, Carl, here's 200 million euros, go and do offshore aquaculture in Portugal, I would call Paul and say, Paul, paper it up. And then we would go running. And I really, truly believe that it can be done in Portugal. This just lines up what it means if you can do it. There's a lot of jobs, there's a lot of industry that needs to be developed, but I think it's doable. The other thing which is interesting is that when Paul talked about seaweed and reforestation, actually what can come out of his project is actually feed for aquaculture, They are working with that in Norway now. I think that is going to be the next big thing, because feed is going to be scarce when we are doing all this farm fish. And the other thing is that a system like we are looking at here would be developed in such a way that it would be sustainable. And nutrition that is coming out of an offshore system would probably be used to feed, or not feed, but it would nurture the whole area where it is. So you could grow other species there. You have, what do you call it, octopus, polvo, would probably benefit from that. So it's a kind of, we are looking at this as a kind of circular economy. This is our proposal at present. This is how we will do it. It builds on what we have been doing together with JMA. I haven't been involved in that project, so I've taken this a step further. This is just a sketch of what we are looking at. I've done the development. We are looking at a new type of cage, because what we have learned during the years we have been working here is that operations in the offshore environment outside Portugal is going to be challenges. And that means that we need to think differently what they are doing in Norway. In Norway, they are taking all the oil and gas engineers coming up of the oil industry, building big, huge, expensive steel structures, instrumenting it with a lot of advanced equipment, and it's all going to be very expensive. We believe, on the contrary, that you have to do it differently. So you need to develop these cages in a different way, purely because of the marine operations you need to be able to do on them. So that is, that I cannot show the details here, because I wouldn't like to give away all the details yet. But this is how a typical 5,000 tons a year production system would look. Anchored with one single anchor, everybody of them to the bore, to the seafloor. Sparboy, which is a very well-known technology from the offshore oil and gas industry. Mooring systems is nothing new. Cabling, and I got a PhD in umbilicals and flexible risers, so I know that I can do that between the central unit and the cages. So this is clearly feasible. If you look at the economics, the big picture, if you are looking at an investment in, say, 400+ million euros, which is necessary to get all the infrastructure in place, and I'll come back to that in the next slide. You are talking about a gross revenue in around 500 million euros and a return on the capital of 20%. We have already presented this to investors. We have had discussions with the investor community in Norway. And they say, as Pedro also mentioned, that if you can show that the biology works and you have a license to produce offshore Portugal, we can get you the money you need. There's no limit. That's another thing why we believe it can be done. And it will be a very good cooperation project between Norway and Portugal, because we also need to develop a local value chain, which we have been doing during this project. So this is a messy slide. Up left, you can see this is the kind of value chain that we are looking on for production of salmon. And you can see I put in 3 vessels there, because that is going to be the key to getting this operational in Portugal. We need to be able to operate offshore. Not so afraid of structural integrity, I'm not so afraid about the environment. That is pure engineering. But to operate, because you have live animals out there and you have an environment you're staying in, I believe that, or we believe that you really need to have dedicated and special ships. Pedro very wisely said when we started this project that, Carl, the problem you will have is vessels. And the problem we have had is vessels. You know, in Norway we have 120 PSV AHVs anchored up in the fjords, just ready to pick up and go out and do things. Here, it was very difficult to get the vessels to do the installation of the system, although the maximum weight is 17 tons, isn't it, for the cage. So that has been the challenge, and I think, but that is also an opportunity for Portugal. Because if you look at the amount of money you need to invest in this, you need to have cages, you need to have systems offshore, you need to have hatcheries, you need to have slaughteries, you need to build a whole value chain around this, this industry. So basically, it's to get new jobs, new products on the stream. We have already started to work with a lot of partners here. SEA, IPMA, WavEC, of course. ASM is a key partner with us. Hydromod we have used with. University of Aveiro has been a very good partner. They have a very open-minded and very progressive way of thinking. And of course, Jerónimo Martins has done the financing and all the project. We have basically been the management team running the project for them. And I throw in the last picture there. That's taken in the new facility for ASM up in Aveiro. Because if you saw the previous picture, I showed you some spar buoys. They have now the capability to roll these kind of spar buoys, which means that the production cost of these kind of spar buoys will be much less than if you wanted to build it in a traditional way. So we will develop these partnerships further. We have set up a company in Ilhavo. I remember it correctly, Paul. Portugal. And we intend to use that as a vehicle to run forward. So, is everything green and bright and blue on the sky? No, it isn't, because things are moving extremely fast. It's a very interesting one. If you look at the middle picture there, both Morten and myself, we used to work in a company called Global Maritime, which is an engineering company in Norway. So Arne in Global Maritime, he developed the cage you can see in the middle for a company called Erco in Norway. If you look at the cage to the right, that's a Chinese cage that has been built and put offshore full of fish. So that is a threat, that the technology just disappears from us. China is already doing subsea aquaculture. They put cages in the water. We have done the pilot one, we are doing the pilot one. In Norway, they are looking now, there's a governmental committee looking at how can we get offshore aquaculture areas. You can see the green areas on the map of Norway to do offshore aquaculture, and the technology is coming on stream. It's much more expensive than we are talking about for this project here, but it's moving very fast. So the speed of development is of essence. If you are not fast enough, we will be left behind. Okay, it might be that we can buy technology from off the shelf and then deploy it here and grow fish. But then we won't have a local industry in Portugal actually serving what we are doing. And what we have seen here during this project is that that is key to get things moving. If you don't have the local industry with you, so you can actually pick up the phone, get somebody to come out and fix it for you, you have problems. So the question is, how fast can we move in Portugal? And I believe that 6 months is a very long time. Oops. So, thank you. This is the pictures. No, you can't see that. Okay, it fell off. It was a lot of nice pictures from the project in North. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, for wanting to listening to me, and thank you for being here. It's the first time. I think I possibly am the only one here from an oil and gas company. I won't bet on it, but I've seen no one else. So I'll try to give you a little bit of a perspective of what is happening in an oil and gas company, maybe what's happening in Norway, and where is the driving forces here. This is what is Technip FMC today. It's 37,000 employees. It's worldwide. We are into all kinds of oil and gas industries, onshore, offshore, subsea, so it stretches from deep water Brazil to shale gas in the US. But you know what I'll tell you about in the next few minutes is that there are, let's say, some clouds moving in over the oil and gas industry, and I'll try to explain to you what that is really. Anyway, the clouds moving in are really that we know that what we do have a climate effect. and we want to work to encounter that problem. This is also a great challenge in Norway. That is, let's say, a large oil and gas producer. So we are really wondering now what next. So how do you really, can you imagine what would happen if you turned 37,000 employees into working on, let's say, clean environment? That would really do it, wouldn't it? And what I'm about to tell you now is not a story of what happens from top management. It's a story of what happens with people inside the organization. Because the drive we have for a cleaner climate, for different energy solutions, for salmon fish farming, is all coming from within. It's a grassroots movement gaining traction in Europe, in Brazil, in Norway, less so in US in some areas, but in other areas, US, very important. So anyway, some of us took the initiative 2 years ago that we really want to do something with this. We want to try to shape Technip FMC into a change of footing, into being 2 feet in oil and gas, to be at least change the footing into, let's say, cleaner energies. So we shaped what we call our ocean venture. It really is a venture because what we are doing today is developing projects. We are financing projects, partly internally, partly externally. We're building new network and really gearing up for, let's say, higher industrial stake in this. So our starting point is the changes required in the energy sector in Norway, really meaning new energy systems for offshore and marine. What does that really mean? What is happening in Norway these days? Okay. We have signed up to the Paris Agreement, and we need to cut, let's say, CO2 emissions by 40% over the next decade. We've signed up to that. What is happening now is that 64 electrical ferries are being made as we speak to do short distance west coast Norway. We have the first hydrogen-powered ships in operation from 2022, and there are several medium-distance ships to follow. So that's important. Where does the hydrogen come from these days? It comes from Germany. Maybe we can do something about that. On the aquaculture side, we see that we need new farming solutions. This is mainly, let's say, a coastal activity in Norway, and that is where we've concentrated our solution. So I wouldn't say that it's ideal for Portugal. There may be better solutions for that. But anyway, we're trying to resolve the problem of sea lice and algae and, you know, high mortality of fish that we see along the coastline of Norway today. All right, so we call it a great future of energy from our oceans, and there is no difference between Norway and Portugal here. We're in the same shoes, with the exception for the oil and gas production, and I really look forward to network and to do business and make future together with you guys here. We have to make that happen. This is what I talked about. We are committed to 40% reduction. A little bit of a sad story is that presently we're running at a 13% reduction. So what does that mean? It means that either we don't meet it or there is a revolution coming. When I feel the temperature in the industry in Norway, politicians, people, the drive of people in Norway, I can say that there is a revolution coming. It will come fast now. And hopefully we can do things that both Norway and Portugal can benefit from. This is a project I talked about. We were venturing into things now, really developing projects. This is a project called Deep Purple. Is that because we are rock enthusiasts? Yes. But there is also another explanation for that. Deep, it means we're really in the subsea world. Purple is the emission frequency of hydrogen. And by the way, we sorted this with a Deep Purple rock band, and they'll be there at the opening of a pilot plant they promised us. So I'll invite you all if that happens, when it happens. We have 40% of Norway's CO2 emission comes from the oil and gas and maritime sector, and this is a great opportunity for us to do something about. There are 162 gas turbines running in Norway as we speak, making up this CO2 emission. So what can we do about that? Okay, this is an interesting one. It's a little tweak of a picture showed by EDP here earlier today. And I'm really glad that we will be partnering in EDP in this venturing going forward. So this shows a combination of a wind farm making electricity and monopile, or it's not a monopile, it's a spark type platform that has a hydrogen process plant on it. So we're converting, let's say, electrical energy to hydrogen at large scale. Either we store it subsea on battery banks, as you see here, or more likely we store it in a large pipeline system going to shore. Anyway, this is a project that we've been running for 3 years, and we spent around 3 million euro on this, and we looked at this solution for, let's say, energy storage. The important thing about hydrogen is that it has a, let's say, tremendous energy storage capacity. It's 124 times the best batteries available in the world today. So it's quite a good medium if you want to store energy, if you want, let's say, a stable energy at the other end of things. There are many applications of this project. It's hydrogen to coastal traffic. In that case, we would have a pipeline to shore. It's power to oil and gas installations. You probably heard about the high wind project that Equinor is launching these days. That will reduce emissions from 5 platforms by possibly as much as 30%. Using hydrogen in combination with wind, we could reduce by 80%. You could reduce 100, but it's not economic viable. So we go for 80. Hydrogen and oxygen to fish farming is very interesting. The fish farming we are looking at is, let's say, in artificial cages, so it's fully enclosed, which means that we have to oxygenate the water. So a combination here of, let's say, taking oxygen and hydrogen out of the water is a good combination. And then we're also into situations of power to remote islands. I would love to announce that I'm going to Caribbean on a business tour. I hope to do so next year, because we have people that are very interested in the combination of wind, hydrogen to power the islands that are running on diesel today. This is another application. We believe that harbors will be an important hub for hydrogen in the future. And we believe that storing hydrogen subsea is a very viable way of doing it, because it's really safe and it doesn't disturb the traffic or take land areas or anything like that. So this is a solution we're also developing. And I think this solution here can be extremely viable for many ports, including Portugal's ports in the future. So from this, you feed in hydrogen to ships, to heavy transport, to trains, etc., etc. And of course, you can use energy from a wind farm, or you could use energy from any source really of electricity. and okay, and it's also a tariff thing, right? You could produce energy during night, for instance, and store it here, and it becomes a viable system. So we're really looking at energy systems here. Okay, this is what we call ocean tech. We have, together with a fish farmer and a biotech company, cooperated for 3 years to develop next generation of fish farming. We spent together something like 4 million euro in doing that, built 2 pilot plants. Okay, what is this all about? This is really 6 totally enclosed cages that has artificial feeding system. It's got, let's say, the hydraulics here are made to have the best conditions of fish and have them to have the best, life when they're in here. So it's really something that also takes care of the fish and takes care of the quality at the end. So this is, we pump up water from variable depths to keep the temperature ideal, and there is no pollution to see from this. We take care of all the, let's say, droppings from the fish. We take care of that, we process it, it becomes viable minerals, really. We have the ability here to sort fish by size, and we can transport fish between all these cages as we like. Last one. This is what I believe in. I believe we as a company have to do a change in footing, and I really am looking forward what 37,000 people could do if we really go for it, together with you guys here. I think the future is about networking and speed, and that's what I see here today. Thank you so much.
I retain some message, in particular from Pedro and from Mr. Hansen, that data, you need data, and you need weather, data, ocean, temperature, waves, maritime litter, and you need connectivity. Mr. Hansen say that there are preparation or there are revolution ongoing. I should say related to space, and space and ocean, they are quite close related. This is, let's say, the genesis that our government took this action to create our National Space Agency to be aligned with these perspectives of this new revolution that happens also in the space, and how the data and big data will be a reality in the upcoming years. And then we will have the connectivity that we need to merge, to join all these technologies. So this is next here. Just briefly, last year, the government approved what we call the Research, Innovation, Growth Strategy for Portugal, in particular for space, which is an agenda for a decade, and there are some strategic objectives, but summarize all these big text that I put there, to leverage our heritage that we have since 20 years ago, when we started this ecosystem with some companies, to become Portugal a space nation. So we have some, let's say, very good conditions, and the moment, as I said, is a revolutionary moment that we are facing to try to put Portugal in the roadmap of space technologies. There are some, Portugal is about aquaculture, but I retain some message, in particular from Pedro and from Mr. Hansen, that data, you need data, and you need weather, data, ocean, temperature, waves, maritime litter, and you need connectivity. Mr. Hansen say that there are preparation or there are revolution ongoing. I should say related to space, and space and ocean, they are quite close related. This is, let's say, the genesis that our government took this action to create our National Space Agency to be aligned with these perspectives of this new revolution that happens also in the space, and how the data and big data will be a reality in the upcoming years. And then we will have the connectivity that we need to merge, to join all these technologies. So this is next here. Okay. So just briefly, last year, the government approved what we call the Research, Innovation, Growth Strategy for Portugal, in particular for space, which is an agenda for a decade, and there are some strategic objectives, but summarize all these big text that I put there, to leverage our heritage that we have since 20 years ago, when we started this ecosystem with some companies, to become Portugal a space nation. Yeah, so we have some, let's say, very good conditions, and the moment, as I said, is a revolutionary moment that we are facing to try to put Portugal in the roadmap of space technologies. There are some, Portugal space is an instrument to implement this strategy. And why I'm saying this strategy is, let's say, a recognition of the sector, and particularly that there are something that will change our lives in the upcoming years. So the Portuguese Space Agency, it was created because it was and it still is an ambition for our national institutes, also from our ecosystem, our companies, is, let's say, understanding the opportunity that we have now to attracting some new players with this disruption moment that we are living in the new space technologies, and of course is a responsibility that we have as a country to look forward to the students, the next generations, and of course toward to the skilled, the persons they are just coming from our universities. As I said, Portugal Space, there are some in their strategy, there are some main base word that becomes Portugal Space Nations, but will be focused particularly in Atlantic. I really like this picture because this gives you how big we are as an Atlantic nation. If you are looking at this picture, and with the current negotiation for extending our platform, continental platform, we are one of the biggest countries in Europe. And if you look, we have a huge area to put our aquaculture in place, if the weather and the conditions will allow that. So, if we are looking this area as a raw material, we have very good reasons to exploit these raw materials and to sell these raw materials. An example is what we are talking about here. But there are much more. This is our influence as a Portugal, as a nation in Europe, together with Macaronesia, together with the islands of Cabo Verde and Madeira. We have very good and very huge opportunities in so many areas. This is an area that we need to monitor, to take an advantage, a big advantage for our location, linking some continents, and many things happens here every day. So if you look to the main corridors for the traffic, we need to take care about what is happening in our waters. And this particular is an update of the weekly traffic that we have is quite amazing. And the central focus is in the middle of Atlantic is the Surge, which is still our territory. So if we look at this, we are, of course, looking to a huge opportunity to make business and to interpret this as a raw material. And we are, as I said, I retained the idea of big data, and also the revolution. So this year we are promoting what we call a moonshot challenge, artificial intelligence, to take care about our oceans. It was an initiative that it was promoted in the Web Summit. This is a $500,000 award that will allow some companies to present some solutions with the Earth observation data set combined with the artificial intelligence this year is to bring to the table the discussion about maritime litter and to create models to the maritime litter, particularly this year applied to the plastics. If someone of you have some curiosity, you can go to the Moonshot Challenge webpage. You have all the details. This will start in January next year. And one of the most important messages, I will finish, is democratization of space. We are talking about the revolution. And I will say in 2 years, the way we understand now the connectivity, the way we will use the huge data with the new generations of 5G together with terrestrial networks combined with the satellite networks, we will be able to have really a connectivity environment. And democratization of space, that means each one of us should use the space as you are using now our mobile phone that is preparing also for a bigger revolutions with the new constellations coming, and also the commitment that our national agency, space agency, together with the European Space Agency, to bring to this part of the world some assets which will be very important to our, let's say, footprint in the space domain. One is to promoting the constellations of Earth observation satellites over the Atlantic. We are committed to promote this starting next year, also taking advantage of our geostrategic location, particularly in Azores, and promoting the access to space. It's funny because we are here with Norway. Also Norway is in the race to access to space, for a new and low-cost access to space, using small rockets to, let's say, feed this appetite of big constellations that we are preparing to this decade. So there are also, I will back to the big data, there are big data and connectivity near real time together with the revolution that we are, let's say, involved in these upcoming years to change the paradigm, because the paradigm of the space and use of the space is start to change. Okay, Joaquim.
Okay, thank you very much, Ricardo.